And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Let's pray. We thank you, O God, for gathering us together from coast to coast. A sign and a symbol and a little thread of the great network of humanity of which we are all a part. We thank you for weaving and holding us together, and we ask your blessing and wisdom and joy in this conversation that we get to share. We ask that you would increase our joy and teach us to do the same for one another and for this world. In all of its aches and pains, we lift it to your care in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Discuss what resonated with you this week among the 8 pillars.
For one thing, they're positive and positivism for humanity, and that, you know, we will work through this, and with God's help, and education and applying compassion at a great extent and generosity to move forward.
I'd like to start with something I found was given to me. Can you read it?
Yes.
Ah.
That is beautiful. Yes, that is nice.
So true.
Can you read it? I couldn't see it far enough.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
God gives us wonderful opportunities disguised as impossible situations.
Over and over and over again.
So you're saying God is generous.
Very.
There you go.
That is perspective and humor, right? I'm trying.
His math isn't good, but he's generous.
I liked it that I think it was the Dalai Lama that said our greatest teachers are our enemies or our hardships or something along that line. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did what did you think of when you read that? Why did that resonate?
I think because one of our daughters has chronic illnesses that make life hard for her. And I think that it would be, I bought her a copy of the book. She has surgery on Thursday, so I'm going to give it to her to read during her convalescence. But I just think it'll be very helpful to her as she struggles with her difficulties to have that perspective. That her, I mean, she fights an uphill battle with multiple illnesses. So I just think that's a good perspective for her. And for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think, again, it all comes down to perspective. I'll tell you what resonated most with me was near the end of the book when they point out that without obstacles, without strife, loss, grief, suffering, joy wouldn't be as wonderful as it is. I liken it to, and I was talking about this with my podcast partner last week. No, I'm not going to plug my podcast on your Zoom meeting, Brian. You're welcome. But we were talking about the concept of sports and how the Chicago Cubs, for example, went over 100 seasons without winning it all. So can you imagine the joy of being a Chicago Cubs player when they finally bring it home? And that it would not taste as sweet without the agony of defeat.
Just a quick one of many stories from that year that really I found very touching. There was a fellow in Chicago, lifelong Cubs fan, just like his dad, just like his granddad, and somewhere in his mid-60s, he drove to his father's grave in Indiana with a transistor radio to listen to Game 7 with his dad in the cemetery. I mean, that's what that meant.
I liked the whole section in the book about humor, and especially the idea that humor sort of levels the playing field. And even this morning during our church online Zoom coffee hour, you were kind of poking fun at yourself, Pastor, and Nick Garris was poking fun at himself, and we all kind of laughed about it. And it's so true that, the ability to see yourself in a humorous fashion and not take yourself so seriously makes everyone around you feel more welcome and more comfortable. And I really liked that both of these, auspiciously revered figures were willing to be kind of,
the butt of the joke.
Yeah. It's refreshing, and I think, there's probably a lot of people in this world who could use a better sense of humor.
It said in there, I made a note that if you have humor and can make fun of yourself, that implies you have trust.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you understand what it is to be human.
Right.
If you think you're superhuman, you don't laugh at yourself.
If you think you're perfect or the center of the universe. Yeah.
But getting back to
the word even comes from the word, it said humus, which means earth. In other words, part of the world.
I was going to say, my parents had an ice cream parlor when I was young, and you could eat ice cream every single day, but that didn't make the ice cream taste any better or more special when you haven't had it for a long time, and then suddenly you have it. So there's that perspective too. Back to what you were talking about earlier.
Had you ever thought about the etymological, but also the spiritual connection between humility and humor?
Not until they made the point. I thought that was most interesting.
But it's interesting about humor. They talk about in the book how to give others joy is the reward for that is joy for yourself. But we often hear that comedians are very sad people, and their job is to give joy to audiences, right? So if I were to have interjected a question to those two men during this time, I would have said, what is that, phenomenon? Why do people feel so sad when they are almost purging their comedic self to please others? I don't know. That was a point that popped into my head.
It's sad clown phenomenon, and I think it has to do with they can be the translators of Earth's humorous situations, but I think they feel all that pain still.
Maybe.
So there's,
What do you think, Brian?
I think, and I'd want to hear what others think too, but I think some of it is a bit of art of translation, that the sadness and the pain actually becomes part of the fuel in the tank, right? That drives you. And so the sadness, the despair, the hopelessness, the hurt leads to compassion and a thirst for joy. And when you combine the thirst for joy with compassion for others, you begin to seek to bring joy to others. That'd be my best guess.
You could also argue that comedians make people laugh. Sometimes it's cynical, and is that really joy?
Yeah.
Well, they did make the case in the book about humor at other people's expense and humor that's mean-spirited versus humor that's kind of joking about the human condition and sort of things that everyone can relate to, and how, funny it is just to be a human being.
Yeah.
I remember hearing when Robin Williams committed suicide and died. You never would have thought that of Robin Williams.
See,
it's so funny, but he had so many issues, and it's like a mask to cover up the pain that they are feeling that they cannot address.
I do wish the book had addressed suicide a little bit, because they talk about the depths of sorrow and things of that nature, but they just didn't get to that particular thing, which is really, worldwide. It is a phenomenon that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Where is someone's sorrow so deep that they can't find any joy to live?
Yeah.
Well, this is part of what they talked about also with the interconnectedness of all of us.
Yeah.
We all need each other. We're not isolated.
Right.
The human family, and I was quite impressed with the scientific evidence tying in all these to our human biology.
They talked about you're born alone and you die alone.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is you're with those 7 billion people.
Uh-huh.
You need the human touch.
And all 7 billion are born alone and die alone. Well, twins don't, maybe. And a few people die in the same car crash. But for the most part, most of us have to do those things alone. And so we're all together in that aloneness, though, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it when the Dalai Lama was talking about having, being at meetings where people are real serious, and he wishes something would go wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Wish their chair would break.
Yeah.
And that little joke about the the bishops who were beating their breasts, saying before God they were nothing. Shortly, one of the lowly acolytes approached and started to beat his chest, professing he was nothing. And one bishop nudged the other and said, "Look who thinks he's nothing."
Yeah. He has no right. They talk at the end about that they were trying to set up a documentary. Do you know if there's any way that we could, would it be on Netflix, or was some way that we could stream it into our TVs?
That's a good question. I've not looked into that, but my first look would be on the website, because this has a website.
Okay.
Boy,
Is that on the back cover or where?
It's in here somewhere, I thought.
Probably in the back. There's a lot of references.
Page 348 says, for more information about this book and video footage, please visit bookofjoy.org.
.org, yeah.
There you go.
Hey, did anybody else cry reading the last part of this book? Yeah. How hard is it for a book to make you cry? That's amazing. I cried twice.
Yeah, when he says, I will remember you when I die.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Their farewells, yes.
yeah.
And then when the children were retelling their story about crossing,
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
there'd be a map, and that journey.
Oh yeah, we looked on a map to see from that province in Tibet to where they went.
Dharamsala.
Yeah, how far they had to travel,
Oh.
and it's a staggering distance.
Yeah.
And hiding the whole time.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing to me that the parents would do that, knowing they might not see their child.
That's what.
But that's the great love they had for their children of protection, I think, you know, and having a better life.
It's still amazing to me.
Danielle mentioned the kinder transport, in World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They're little babies on those trains and just hope to God to be taken care of.
One of my neighbors was on the kinder transport, came to the United States.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, one of my
You
instructors.
can't think of a bigger sacrifice you would give.
Yeah.
Christy had warned me that she cried at the end, and that the children's village was one of the most touching things for her, which I had not gotten to that point yet. But today, after I did get to that point, I did Google that children's village and that visit, and the whole thing is on there, and it was really quite moving to watch the two of them.
We'll have to
Well, you
look.
can imagine the adoration of the children for these two great men. It was just
Oh, yeah.
I don't know,
joy.
but I do worry that India is carrying the burden of having to protect all these people. And as we can see in our own country, things change all the time. I do worry that it's an unstable place for even their safety now. What do we know about India and it's been 50, how many years? 53 years, something like that? Is it seem stable that there still remains safe there and that this will continue, or is India?
I think it'd be too hard for people to get there.
Yeah.
India is so concentrated with people, they know that they're there, but they may not feel that it's worth the effort, because he's not doing anything negative to China, particularly right now.
And what do we think happens when, God forbid, of course, it's inevitable that the Dalai Lama does pass? What happens, do you think? What do we think happens?
And what happens to so many, many, many people? The next Dalai Lama is identified, however that happens. I have no idea.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting statement too.
Yeah, I'd like to.
And maybe some 3-year-old is plucked out of Tibet and is the Dalai Lama. But what happens to all of these pilgrims and everyone who has gone before and in transition? So many people can be easily lost.
I don't know where it was in the book, but I really thought that was pretty interesting that Desmond Tutu commented about what China had done ended up being a gift to us. And that was so true. They were trying to be so cruel and sinful and hurtful, and yet what they ended up doing was a gift to the world.
Yes.
Earlier, I looked up what the Dalai Lama has been saying about the pandemic, and much to our surprise, right? He says, take care of others. Taking care of others is actually taking care of yourself, His Holiness said. To just take care of yourself is narrow, foolish, and short-sighted. As much as you love yourself, you should take care of others more. So again, preaching.
That fits in, that fits with the book.
Care for others. And
I found something interesting online I didn't expect to see. On Desmond Tutu, it says, joins advocates to call for right to assisted death. That's what he's requesting.
That is it.
So that's what his plan is. Which I personally applaud.
What do we know about his current state of health?
That's what I was kind of looking for. I didn't hear, it didn't give me a clue.
It talked about his recurrent prostate cancer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
not in here, but yeah, they did in the book.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
So
and that's 5 years old. So
that could be a precursor to his thought pattern.
Amazing.
I don't know. I believe he is still with us.
He is,
but I haven't heard
I
anything
checked,
about
yeah, he is still alive.
about his health condition right now.
You'll all be happy to know that the Dalai Lama does have an Instagram, an official Instagram that his
Yeah.
is. I know, isn't that funny? But
I
the
wanna follow.
photos of him. I looked at it today and I was just struck by his face is so serene and filled with kindness, and he smiles all the time, and it really is a lesson, because sometimes I think I can maybe, look dour or maybe unfriendly, and it just is a reminder to like have a warmth in your face. He just always looks like somebody you just want to be around.
Maybe if we could all meditate for 5 hours a day, we would look a lot
There you
less stressed.
You can.
We can, yeah. In between what? Gotta give
Your
up something.
choices, though.
go. At
Yeah.
2 in the morning.
Going on a different tact, I looked for myself how I could be a better person in this book.
Yeah.
And I thought, I have lost my joy and I want to find it again. And I think this is helpful. I'm not sure in what way I'm going to do it, but it's resonated with me personally. I understand the world and everything that's going on, but I think if we're going to change, we have to start with us. One person at a time has to make changes and find that joy and pass it on.
Of course, we only can control ourselves, not anybody else.
That's right. And
You,
when we have the joy, other people can feel it and we can pass it on. But if we don't have it, there's no hope.
You anticipated one of my questions, which is at the end, there are all kinds of joy practices related to the 8 pillars and to overcoming obstacles and all of that. If you could pick one, and you can, where would you begin your focus? What would you do? I would, my unsolicited advice is don't try to do all 16 of them at once.
No, one at a time.
It just give you more stress.
I think generosity for me, be more generous.
Mhm.
I would choose.
I think we are fairly generous now, but the problem with it is when you give money, you don't have the personal impact, and you don't see any results personally.
But in the book, it talked about generosity as not just money, but also of yourself.
Action.
I would like to more, except physically I can't get around to do a lot of it. That's maybe there are things that I could do that I'm not aware of.
Carol, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I would choose compassion. Because I would like to have more understanding of what other people are going through and what their point of view is. I could use more of that. I don't want to judge. And that's a biggie for me, I think.
Yeah.
I've been trying to focus on gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Gratitude and meditation.
I'm going to try to focus on warm-heartedness. It's kind of hard to show that you're warm-hearted when you've got a mask on your face and you're trying to stay 6 feet away. But I've really tried to put an effort into that under these circumstances, and I think it's working.
Karen, you
I feel
can
like
smile.
I'm a lot of warm-heartedness back, and I want to do that even when I disagree. I want people to see my warm heart, even if I think they're all wrong.
Karen, you can smile with your eyes. You can smile with your mouth, but if your eyes are not smiling, it's not the same. They can see your eyes
Your
with
whole
a mask.
body has to be. Yeah, your whole body has to be.
That's right.
That's one of the practices they ask for or advise.
I always try to be such a nice, warm-hearted person and walking down the street and saying hello to strangers and that sort of thing. And a lot of times you just get nothing in return.
Right.
And I go to like talk backs to myself as, good morning. And then they'll give me nothing and I'll say, or not. A little bit of an exercise in futility a lot of times. So I'm not sure that really helps me, but I try. It's tough. It's a tough world out there to be compassionate.
I think it helps other people tremendously. When I've had a family member in the hospital at risk of dying, if somebody is kind to me, it means everything. I mean, it's amazing how powerful it is. If you're in a place of pain, just that. Once when our daughter was in the hospital and it was serious, I went down to the gift shop and the lady in the gift shop was just kind. And it was like balm washing all over me. It's amazing.
Brian, I was going to say, when you were talking about greeting people on the street, when I do that and they don't answer, I try to figure out why. Was it because they've got something in their ears and they didn't hear or see me? Or they are afraid, or they're, I don't know. There's a whole lot of reasons why people do things.
We live in a complex that's got a lot of little interconnected pathways and walkways. And when you walk, you're pretty much confined to our community unless you really want to go down Devonshire. So we see people, and we've commented that a lot of times when you speak to people and say good morning, they don't speak our language. They really, truly don't. And if we just sort of accept it like, well, okay, and we still speak to other people along the way too. It helps when you have a dog. It really does, but they comment on the dog, or you get acquainted with people. I mean, that's how we met our friends around here for the most part, when we had our dogs for umpteen years.
I will say, traveling around the country, you do experience different friendliness in different parts of the country. And big cities, people aren't used to that interaction.
Except Minneapolis.
Okay. And
Seattle.
But here in Los Angeles, you say hello to people walking. It just depends. It's a crapshoot. But in small towns, I think it's a little more common. You can be taken aback by how friendly people can be.
Yeah. Well, and it's when dog looks in the mirror, the name tag reads God. And so always bring God with you, and you usually do. My prayer life morphed somewhere years and years ago from I'm going to sit down now and make this very formal to a much more informal kind of companionship. So sometimes, I don't always remember this, but sometimes I'll say good morning and you get the cold shoulder, and you just say a little prayer because, okay, all right, you're listening to me. Even if it's, Lord bless this asshole. That's a prayer. And doing that, even if there is no God, you hear yourself. Mm-hmm. And I catch myself being judgmental and shallow, and it's a little mirror, it's a little check.
Yeah, it's nice to think that God's in your pocket at all times. So like when you run into something like that, you can just have a little chat with the guy who always listens, or the lady who always listens.
There you go. Right.
It's and there was There was also the
also a
section.
cultural thing. I'm sorry, it's also a cultural thing. If you go to Europe, people don't have eye contact. Wherever you go, like here, we're all friendly, we're all smiling, we're all saying hello, but you go someplace else and it's not appropriate to have eye contact or smile. It's really a cultural thing in a lot of ways, is how you respond to other people.
There was the section about why some people can't accept a hello or love. And it's because they are afraid that we want something in return.
Absolutely.
Or maybe they don't love themselves. And if they don't love themselves, it's very hard to be loved, to accept love, and to love others.
You're right.
It's really sad, very sad.
Yep.
Although I've been there myself.
Well, how is somebody else going to love me? I don't even love me.
Well, that's
You
a
know?
big problem.
Yeah.
I think that first is we have to love ourselves.
And we never know what somebody's going through in their life. I mean, you know, maybe their husband left them this morning, or maybe they've got a really sick child at home and they're preoccupied, and
I think that's a lot of
That's
it.
so true.
yeah.
I'm the most angriest when I can't find my keys. So I don't know that the big stuff versus the small stuff. Is,
You can't find your keys or your tea. What did you say, Brian? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was your keys?
Is the sound garbled or is it just on mine?
It is on mine too.
Yeah, it's like Julie's sound.
Became a robot there for a minute.
Yeah.
I was thinking that
Kind of felt like I was
I've got to shut my
ordering
front
from the
door.
drive.
when I was younger, I used to approach people more and just chat with people, and I think I've gotten afraid to talk to people sometimes that I don't know, you know, strike up a conversation, because I'm afraid I'll get too entangled with them, or I don't know exactly why. I used to do that a lot more.
yeah, I got involved in a conversation on a bus with a lady one time, and she just started going off on tangents, and yeah, you never know. But yeah, you want to have the trust. It's all about trust, right? They talk in the book about the only way to true friendship is through trust. And so you start there, and if that trust is, you know,
We hope it works out.
yeah.
It's kind of like talking to somebody beside you on an airplane.
That's exactly, yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah, it's easy to do, but sometimes you kind of regret it because you.
What happened that changed your mind about that? What happened to you that made you afraid to interact anymore?
I was just wondering. I think when I was younger, I felt more. You know, I think I had less to lose, or something. I don't know. Now, you know, I've got a home and a family and a car, and you know, I don't know whether it's that. I mean, I'm sort of embarrassed to say that is true, but I'm hesitant to. I'd like to do that more. Just strike up conversations with people and get to know, you know, get involved with people. And I don't know exactly why I stopped.
Next time I see you, will you talk to me?
Got you. I will.
All right.
It's
My
interesting.
dad was an outstanding example of someone who could talk to absolutely everyone. And if we'd be in a restaurant on a trip and he'd go out early, we'd go outside after we were done eating, and he'd be sitting there talking to some homeless person on the bench or something. And he got to know people that way. But actually, when he died, we got letters of people saying that he had helped them so much in their lives with problems and things. And we had no idea that he knew them, or we didn't know the people, but he never confided in us about their things. And he was always, when I was growing up, we go down, it's a little town, 10,000. And we go down the street, and I was always very shy, and we'd be together, and he'd say hello to everybody, and he'd say, "Don't you know that boy?" And I'd say, "Yes." "And isn't he in your class?" "Yes." "Well, why didn't you say hello?" And he was just, for him, it was just very easy. And it just, I try to emulate that.
Good.
Yeah.
I remember my grandfather answered the phone one time, and it was a wrong number. And he said, "Well, I got up and I went to the phone, so, where are you from and who's your parent?" He wanted to strike up a conversation because he'd gone to the trouble to answer the phone.
He never met a stranger.
Right. He wouldn't do that with a robocall now, though.
No. I wonder if it's
friends that do.
I wonder if it's preconceived notions sometimes that I think, like I remember one time on an airplane, I didn't talk to somebody next to me for most of the flight, and then chatted near the end of the flight, and I wished I'd struck up a conversation earlier because it was really great, but I was reluctant. I mean, I think I had some reading to do and stuff, but it's a preconceived notion about, will this be good?
Well, I think that was one of the interesting things they kept coming back to in the book, which is most people are inherently good. I mean, sure, you're going to meet the occasional person on the bus who's going to drive you crazy, but for the most part, interaction is positive, and we have to remember that, because I think, the news and social media and, scare tactics are kind of telling us otherwise, but for the most part.
Well, at the time of the lady I was talking to on the bus, we were doing a podcast, and all the people we were bringing on our show, my philosophy was every person has a story, every single person. It doesn't matter how lowly you think they might be, or homely, or whatever, or boring. They have a story.
Right.
And I was really interested in everyone's story at that moment. And this woman was taking me to task about, I don't think anybody has a story. Everybody's just horrible, So it was an interesting 5-minute conversation, but as I moved my feet.
But Pastor, that today the church out in Thousand Oaks had that talk back about the Queer Eye episode that the ELCA pastor from Philadelphia was featured on earlier this year. Marie was on the call earlier, I think. And that was really kind of the gist of the whole talk, was what makes that show and that experience so meaningful is that it's really just sharing people's stories. And if we all knew each other better, we'd all,
get along.
We'd all get along better, right? It's all about telling people who we are.
We have this instinct to just judge immediately.
Yeah.
Someone that we see.
Or to just stick in our own little safety bubble.
Based on our past experiences of people of that category.
Well, yeah. And so it cycles again back to trust.
Yeah.
And humility and the courage of vulnerability and, and how do you look at this other person? This is one of the other 7 billion sisters and brothers I have, or this person is someone I don't want to talk to because I've made my judgment. But how do you?
Yeah. The homelessness crisis in Los Angeles is a really good example of this, because we all have preconceived notions about why there are so many homeless people in LA. We might think maybe it's because of the drug problem, or maybe it's because of whatever. Yeah. And I think there are agencies out there that are doing a really good job about having some people who are experiencing homelessness share their stories and share how it happened to them. And it could be as simple as they lost a job and they were one paycheck away from being on the streets. And I think when people can relate to their stories and their circumstances and learn their humanity, which is really what this book is all about. It's all about sharing in the human connection, the humanity, the human condition,
human experience.
Yeah.
A half a mile from us is one of the local drug centrals. It's a 7-Eleven. So we have a lot of homeless people that are obviously addicts. They totally don't know where they're at or what they're doing. You can tell that. And they wander down onto Valley Circle in Devonshire, and you know, we have to keep them away from coming into our patios and things like that if they get, you know, not too frequently, but it does happen. And you think, according to the book, you know, I should be befriending them as well. You know, they're really no worse, no, I'm no better than they are.
Yeah, I don't know. You would say you have to befriend them, but we can have compassion for the circumstances that got them addicted. And we can pray for a system that enables them to get the resources and help that they need.
You can start by praying for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are those out there who want to just get rid of them, just like put them in a truck and drive them somewhere else, you know, and that's not compassion.
That's not changing.
They did that in Germany.
My warm-heartedness doesn't come because the person I'm meeting is so good. My warm-heartedness comes because Christ has been so good to me. And God, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity has been so good to me that I have warm-heartedness to you. Not because I think you're so good. I may be very suspicious about you. You're a stranger. And Malcolm Gladwell has written a book about that, meeting strangers, and how you should treat them in those first few minutes, because you don't know them. But my warm-heartedness comes from God and the Trinity, not because the person that I just met I think is so great or so good. I don't know them, but I can still be warm-hearted.
But
So be careful, folks. There's a lot of strange people out there. 1 in 4 are mentally ill.
You want to name names?
Don't make that lessen your warm-heartedness, because that's coming from God, the Holy Spirit.
And your warm-heartedness is a response to that.
Pardon? I didn't hear that.
Her warm-heartedness is her response to that graciousness of God.
Of God, yes.
We just have a struggle sometimes sharing that.
I have experienced your warm-heartedness, Karen. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I've experienced yours. And it's extended to all.
Marie?
I didn't hear that.
I have found that when I get to know someone, I remember distinctly in college not liking a couple of girls and thinking they were stuck up and whatever. And, you know, it was probably my fault as much as theirs. We ended up teaching together in a small town, and I'm talking small. And we became the best of friends when I got to know them and understood them. And even when I have some big disagreement with someone else, I try to, in our talking, try to see where they're coming from and walk in their shoes. And it helps me to understand them better.
A lot of stuck-up people are only shy.
I'm shy too, Carol.
No, you're not. You're perfect.
You're right. Very hard for me to talk to someone new.
I noticed.
One can be both shy and perfect, you know, like Danielle.
Well, don't put me in that category.
I found years going through my career, the people who I had, you know, butted heads with early on, upon meeting them, I became very good friends with over time. So yeah, there is something to be said about letting them into your heart a little bit.
Right. Sometimes a relationship can mature.
I like the story about the prisoner. I'm just looking here. His name was Anthony Ray Hinton. And all those years that he was in prison, and yet he wasn't angry. And he said that if I'm angry and unforgiving, they will have taken the rest of my life.
Right.
And I just remember personally, it was my ex-husband that I despised. I held on to such hatred for so many years, and the only person it hurt was me.
Absolutely.
And the day that I decided to let it go, I think I lost 50 pounds and I found joy. So it's so true that we just can't live in the past. We can't hold on to anger. We just have to turn it
Let
over to
it go.
God.
Let it go.
Yeah.
That brings us back full circle to the top of the hour where we talked about forgiveness, because in my experience, forgiveness isn't for them, the other party.
Right.
It's for us, the one holding on to our grudge. That gets heavy after a while. The faster you can let it go, the easier it's going to be on you.
It can eat you alive.
So true.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you don't forget. I think that I thought that was really helpful, that you don't, because, forgive means forget, just let it go, just get over it.
Nope.
That
Nope.
can be, that's denial. That's not healthy either.
Mhm.
So you hold on to it as long as you need to, and then you let it go because of, if nothing else, defiance and a refusal to let that define you or your future anymore.
That's right.
Your God makes those decisions at the pearly gates. It's not me that has to make those decisions. So whoever I'm so angry with, their time may come, and I don't have to be the one that makes that decision.
Not forgetting might just mean you don't get that same hurt again, too.
Right. Right.
Well, for me, it's like the guy who fired me 6 months ago, I can be angry with today, but it doesn't help me move forward. So to let that go helps me refocus on my future and try to improve myself today.
Which also circles back to, one, acceptance.
Mhm.
Is that something you can control or not? And then two, the perspective. I can't change this. How might this be a gift? What's the blessing in this? What's this cleverly disguised blessing, as Carol's
It's an opportunity.
sign put? What's the opportunity?
The opportunity to make changes in yourself as well.
It certainly made me available to do drumming on the outdoor services during the
A man was walking through the forest one day when he saw a snake slither across a fire and start burning itself. This man reflexively reaches into the fire to pull the snake out of the fire. Guess what the snake does? That's right, the snake bites him on the hand. Of course. The man then says, "Ow, that hurt," reaches into the woods, grabs himself a stick, goes back to the fire, and pulls the snake out of the fire yet again, this time with the stick instead of his hand. His friend asks him, "What are you doing? The snake bit you. You got to leave that snake to burn. That's that snake's problem." The man says, "Yeah, but I know he's a snake. That's not going to change my approach. Simply because the snake is being a snake doesn't mean I need to change my approach. Perhaps I'm going to learn a little something the second go round and get him out of the fire with a stick instead of my hand, but I'm not going to let the snake being a snake change my character or my approach."
There you go.
That's a good one.
I think one of the most amazing acts of forgiveness in recent memory is the families of the parishioners in Charleston.
Oh, yeah.
9 families in Charleston who were killed in the Bible study.
Right.
By the shooter, and each of them stood up in court and forgave the shooter. And I want to think that I could be that gracious But they all spoke about, I actually went today when I was reading the passage in the book and went and looked at the case because I wanted to remember a little bit about it. All spoke about the need to not let vengeance and fear kind of fill their hearts for the rest of their days.
Right.
Well, again, forgiveness isn't for the shooter. It's for the victim. It's for the person. It's for us. It's not for them. To be able to learn that lesson and apply it in your daily life is integral to the pursuit of joy, in my humble opinion.
Doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
Oh, if it was easy,
It's a
everybody'd
challenge.
be doing
It's a challenge. But again, it's something we need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is stuff we need to work on all the time, even if you're really good at it.
Well, we're force-fed in a lot of our pop culture media that vengeance is the best path. You know, we just saw Antebellum, and very cathartic because vengeance.
It's a revenge fantasy.
It's a revenge fantasy, and that's entertaining, but it's not what our hearts need.
And it's a, you know, it's a kind of a gateway drug, right?
Yes.
It feels really good
It's-
at the beginning. It really does. And then,
Yeah. But like everything else in the book, they talk about that instant gratification is very short-lived because you just want it tomorrow. You want it the next day. You want it the next day after that.
mm-hmm.
We have to change our focus on what it is that gives us joy.
That reminds me of the psychology behind one of comic book lore's most famous characters, the Batman. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. And I go out every single night and I wreak havoc because I'm pissed off that my parents were killed as I was a young boy. And he's got to repeat the process every single night because that vengeance is fleeting. He doesn't get his fix. He's got to go back out and do it again. He lives alone in a cave with his butler and his millions. Poor guy. I mean, really, if you think about it, at what point does Batman and his vengeance and his vigilante behavior make him the bad guy?
Right. Would this week's headlines be inappropriate to bring up as far as Breonna Taylor?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think her family is struggling to find what they would deem justice, even though they've been the recipients of a legal settlement and there has been some legal action against at least one of the police officers, but it's not going to bring her back.
Right.
They're still grieving too.
Yeah, it's very sad.
And everybody grieves differently.
And I think too, I mean, I have a dear friend who's a teacher in Atlanta. She's a drama teacher and she's an African-American woman. And she says, you know, it's hard to talk to my students about this. They're all sad and tired and
well, the way the news cycle works,
feeling vulnerable.
The way the news cycle works, she won't have to talk about it next week because something else will take its place.
Well, that's true. It's just hard. This is a tough time in this world. There's so much, you know, and here we go, right? This book was written when? What did you say, 5 years ago?
Yeah. Oh, how about the fact that...
And it was, at that time, it was how do you have joy in a world that's suffering? And here we are 5 years later. How do you have joy in a world that's suffering?
Hours after the plane took off, a 7
Yeah.
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 The cycle goes on.
As they point out many times in the book, those natural disasters or crises also bring out generosity.
Absolutely.
Well, they're beyond the human situation. That is a natural disaster. You know, human disaster is quite different.
No, but think about it. You've heard, I mean, how many GoFundMes do we see on social media where people have cancer or they've been in a horrible car accident and people all of a sudden come out of the woodwork and they're very, very generous. We have a natural ability to be generous when
confronted
with, you know, uniquely challenging situations. Yeah.
And the connection is deepened, you know, the foxhole thing, the people that gather around and support, generosity comes out, humanity comes out. And this, I think, is this dynamic is at the heart of what Luther would call theology of the cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
That goodness and beauty and resurrection come out of suffering and pain and ugliness and injustice and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All of this garbage that we suffer, natural or self-inflicted or whatever. Faith says yes, and God can use this and transform this into something beautiful. And that's our hope. Even when it's not our optimism, it's our hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and that's the deeper thing, right? The joy rather than just the happiness.
The happiness can be kind of fleeting.
Right. Well, thank you for a good hour. And
Thank you.
Yeah, this was wonderful.
You're welcome.
This is one of those few books I think I'll keep around and maybe read again, you know?
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really do encourage you, pick one practice in this coming week and just see how it goes. And it's a choose your own adventure. You don't have to start with the first one. You don't have to go in order. Start with one that speaks to you or resonates with you or that irritates you or sticks in your craw or something, the one you can't forget. That's probably the one that you're being called toward.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you all, and
Thank
blessings
you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Sure.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.